This is Rock Bottom with Ryan. No sugarcoating, no filters. The pain, the chaos, the truth. No bullshit. Just recovery.
So in this two-part episode that I'm doing, I'm interviewing Casey and Shauna, a male and a female, to kind of go over toxic relationships that we experienced during addiction and some of our experiences, some of the breakups, some of the toxicity created because of drinking or drugs, and the lies, the double standards, the jealousy, things that kind of add up and create toxic environment for a relationship. And then we're going to discuss a little bit more about how to have healthy relationships and how to go about relationships in sobriety and some of the things that you'd be looking for in a partner, and hear both perspectives on that. So there's a part one with Casey, part two with Shauna. Hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it.
So, do you think, say, drinking in your past? In a previous episode, you talked a lot about your how drinking kind of impacted your life. But do you think it played a role in your decision making when it came to toxic relationships, as far as relationships you ended up in? Do you think it was because you were drinking, and if you weren't, you would have made better decisions?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of the things about it is when you start drinking with your partner, or, you guys are having that kind of same hobby together. And then, as we were saying too, it's the having drunk sex is not, yeah, it's fun, but it's not as good as it could be. So, yeah, a lot of my drinking led to toxic relationships because I would pick toxic women, and, the only thing we really had in common was getting messed up together. And that also comes with, a lot of other situations with, yeah, not being in the right mindset when you are doing something stupid like driving home drunk, or, you know, ending up in places that you didn't think you'd actually end up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Do you think, did you date many girls that were, say, bartenders? Did you notice nothing against bartenders, but did you notice a pattern in dating bartenders, since they were associated with drinking already, that they ended up kind of contributing to toxic relationships?
yeah, I think the amount of bartenders that I did date were probably worse drinkers than the people that they served at the bar.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah, so it's like they're sober throughout their entire shift, well, at least most of them, and then you get off work and you're like, you're drunk, and then they get drunk, and then bad things happen, emotions get involved, and people turn into with the confidence juice, as I like to call it, and start voicing some very nasty things, and then it becomes a fight, and then there's the makeup sex, and then you both wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, what the heck happened last night?
Yeah, and
So
then you
yeah,
spend the whole day trying to recover from the fight before, yeah, the fight from the night before.
yeah, right.
And do you think alcohol contributes to those arguments? Because when people get drunk, they get the liquid courage to say things they generally wouldn't say. And a lot of times I've noticed in the past that girls would dig deeper and say things that they knew would actually get under my skin, which I would obviously react a lot worse because I had been drinking, and it would go vice versa. I would say things that I generally wouldn't say because we were drinking together, and I'd say something that would obviously be insulting, or point out an insecurity, which I would never do sober, because I think sober, I think I'm a pretty nice guy. But when I had enough drinks in me and we were going back and forth, I would always try to reach for girls' insecurities.
But yeah. Well, and that's the one thing too, is if we never squash something that's happened to us in the relationship in the past, and it's never been dealt with, and then it's something that still eats away at you, of course, when you're drunk or inebriated or high, and then something happens, you're going to bring up the past. It's like you just have a shovel in your back pocket and you're like, hey, I got some ammo on you. And, at that moment in time, you don't really care if you're going to hurt somebody's feelings in the process, because you never dealt with it in the first place, right? So it's those situations that have been, just pushed under the rug that are still there instead of cleaning it up and taking care of it when it happened. So, I mean, dude, the amount of stuff that I've done in my past and having it thrown back in my face, of course, if I'm drunk or was drunk and at the time is never the time to talk about something like that because you're never going to get a result that's actually healthy. And, that's why a lot of domestic violence stuff happens is because, you can't pick on your partner when you guys are both intoxicated. But, that's what comes with being somebody who drinks and parties and, does those kind of things where you're in a relationship where you guys are just two drunks hanging out together.
Yep. And things sometimes do get verbally abusive, sometimes physical. Have you experienced, a lot of the abusive aspects of relationships when they go into dark places like name calling and all that when you're belligerent? Have you experienced that yourself?
I have actually a few times. One case in particularly, I'd just gotten back home from a job. I was working as an oil refinery mechanic, and I get home and I see my girlfriend, who was a bartender at the time, and she comes over and stays the night with me. I'm sober. She's drunk. I just want to go to sleep because I just got done driving like 14 hours to get home. So we're in bed together and I'm asleep, and she was drunk and got upset and dropped a fist on my nose and actually broke my nose right here. And so I woke up and, like, obviously my eyes are watering. There's blood everywhere.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. That one was tough. And then, I've had a coffee cup thrown at my head from the kitchen one time because somebody didn't like what I had to say because I wasn't agreeing with their opinion on, getting more alcohol or, getting more
Yeah.
drunk or more intoxicated. And, women that get really loud and start yelling and screaming and throwing stuff in your apartment or slamming doors and stuff like that. Yeah, the cops have been called a few times. And of course, good old Washington State. And the funny thing is when that last thing I was talking about happened, I was actually sober at that time.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
always
and
scary when it happens when you're sober and they're not. And you get to
yeah,
see everything firsthand. And the next morning, it's like you remember everything and they might not.
and I mean, there's times too where I've never, like, times in my life where I don't remember certain things, but in the same token, I don't think I've never really been a violent drunk,
Yeah. No, me either. I wouldn't call myself an aggressive person, but I was, I will admit on this podcast, I was arrested in college for DV for getting physical with my ex-girlfriend, who I believe we're on good terms to this day. But, I kind of, you know, showed up drunk. She was sober. And, I think she was kind of lashing at me a little bit. And I think I had like shoved her a little bit and it wasn't right, grabbing and shoving and stuff was about as far as I go. I never hit or anything like that, but I definitely got more physical than I ever would if I were sober. So it's always really regrettable. And I ended up in jail and learned my lesson completely. That was when I was 19 years old, but yeah, that was
well, hey,
very
at least you escaped that one, right?
yes, but I mean, but something was under my name for like 6 or 7 years. I wasn't allowed to own a weapon and all this, and I was like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, so you actually had a DV charge on at that point.
Yeah, and it's off my record now, but it was just, yeah, the lawyer didn't really do much for me. I remember when I got arrested, I went into the law office and he was a public defender, and I had never been arrested before. And I went in with an attitude. I was driving up in this new Mustang that my grandma bought me, walk into his office with flip flops on, hung over, and I'm just like, yeah, drop this case for me, and I'm saying this to a public defender. And he and I started arguing. He's like, well, what you did obviously was wrong. It's a crime. I'm like, but you're supposed to be defending me. And then he just, yeah, still got me some minimum plea bargain or whatever. Either way, I knew I was in the wrong, so I was accepting consequences. I had to go to anger management classes, and I remember it was a huge pain in the ass on my record for quite a while. But yeah, I mean, and the girl that I had done it to wasn't even much of a drinker, and she was sober when this happened. I thought she was cheating on me because something was going on in my head. I built up this like scenario in my head that she was cheating on me, and I just showed up at her house, just like, where is he? Where is he? And it
Yeah.
shows where my mind was at.
Well, and isn't it crazy to think about the fact that like when we're in that situation and we're having something like alcohol that takes such an advantage over us, that our mind starts to make up these weird overthinking stories to where we believe our own lies and we project that onto the people that are closest to us. And that's, a lot of the reasons why, relationships fail. And then sometimes, I mean, I know a lot of us too, when it comes to like relationships wise, if in that state of mind, we want to be in a toxic relationship because it's fun. We like the drama. We like the fact that we might be able to lose something.
Yeah.
And,
We're
instead
attracted
of
to
being,
chaos.
yes, exactly. And it's the same thing like what I've told, my girlfriend, as of now, like, I'm like, hey, the reason why the house has to be clean is because when our house is in chaos, everything outside of life is chaos, and like it puts a damper on the relationship when, you got somebody who works 14 hours a day and you work 8 hours a day at a desk and I'm a mechanic, and then there's another thing right there. That's also a toxic trait that I'm trying to work on because when you compare to your partner that you're with is a bad thing, right? Because like you can't compare yourself to your partner. You're supposed to be equal with each other, and it doesn't matter if you're running and they're walking. You still gotta bring your partner up, like they'll do for you in the future, And that's one
Yep.
of those big things that a lot of us forget about. That not everybody's going to be on the same level, but it's about how we create peace for each other instead of toxicity.
Exactly. Exactly. What
And
things do you think?
that's still a learning curve for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm still learning sober, like how to manage myself in any relationship with friends too and family. And I just know that one of the biggest reasons I contributed toxicity to relationships is because I was always lying when I was drinking. And it was usually about drinking. So just when you get in the habit of lying, you just start lying about other little things, like not, sometimes it would lead me to being unfaithful or shady or talk to other girls or even emotional cheating, which I think is still wrong, now that I look back at it. So even if you're trying to build connections with other girls because you're drinking and you like the attention, and that was a big problem of mine in some relationships.
Right. And being somebody who's always looking for the next best thing, right? Like, okay, well, if this isn't going to go the way that I want it to, and being, in like a narcissistic mindset where, having that, trying to have that control over a person in a relationship or whatnot, is, plays a big role in that whole toxic relationship shit, and, we're all human beings. We're all going to do what we're going to do. Right. And so once you kind of like let go of trying to control everybody or everything around you, you start to see that the life that you have gets a lot easier. And, love is more there, and it's more apparent. And like, you're like, okay, well, it's like you don't have to buy things for each other. You have to do things for each other,
Exactly.
instead of like, hey, I brought home a 6-pack of some beer. Let's get drunk tonight. You
Yeah,
know, I got a
I know.
bottle of vodka or tequila.
Yeah.
That's not doing anything other than hurting yourself and your own relationship.
Yep. And that's the bad part about those kind of relationships revolve around drinking is like anytime you're having a bad day or one of us is having a bad day or a good day, the solution is let's go out and drink together, and it's never let's sit around and talk. Let's go to therapy. Let's work this out. We'll go on. Let's go to the gym together. It's always let's go out and drink. I'm like, all right, let's go out and drink and spend $100 and fight at the end of the night again. It's pretty
Yeah,
much how it was.
right. Yeah, that sounds like my relationships. I love
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, that's exactly how some relationships I've been in. And every time, she'd be, asking, "Well, we're going out tonight. We got plans." I'm like, "Oh, great. I have to look forward to spending money and fighting." And those fights would be my fault too. But it's like, it gets old after a while.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's like at a certain point, we can be boys for so long, and then you have to turn the page of being a man and really knuckle down and really understand that like you can't just live your life one day at a time. You do have to plan a little bit for the future, and not saying that that's guaranteed. Having a repeat cycle is something that you get used to and you enjoy it in that mindset of being drunk in a drunken relationship or doing drugs and partying and like being with your partner, like, okay, you can get addicted to your partner at the same time when you like that's the person that you party with. And that's not a healthy thing because it tends to hurt you physically, emotionally, mentally, and it also tends to not make you completely emotionally vulnerable when you're high or drunk. And that's one thing that a lot of people are and myself are afraid of, that like I know that I'm not emotionally available sometimes because I have been hurt a lot, but it's also because I was in toxic relationships and thought that they were the love of my life, right?
Yeah,
Because that's what normal was to me, was a toxic relationship. I mean, it's
same
like
here.
even stems back to like, you know, my parents were a little toxic for each other, and they got divorced and got back together and got divorced and got back together. So it was like having some kind of model to kind of look at, right? That kind of just seemed normal. Fighting was normal.
Yeah, I witnessed all that too growing up. I saw, my parents be in some relationships that I wouldn't say always involved alcohol or anything, but I mean, I didn't see a lot of healthy relationships as a kid. So it's like when I grew up, I kind of expected to have my relationships be dysfunctional too. So do you feel like drinking or doing drugs will only attract, other people that do the same thing, like-minded people, or you had experience in relationships with girls that didn't really do either, and you were able to just kind of mask whatever you were doing on the side?
I've had a plethora of different relationships, and like, I've always kind of been the one person that kind of brings that to the table, right? Like I dated a girl that never had done cocaine before, and I was like, "Hey, we're new to dating. This is what I like to do." And she's like, "Well, I'm not really into that." And then I was like, "Well, I've never tried it. You smoke weed. Why don't you give it a try?" So it was like the peer pressure of it. So it was like, I kept going over the same fucking vicious cycle over and over again because I would get people to do it with me. And, then it became like, oh, you're just a cokehead, blah, blah. And then it was times where she'd be like, hey, let's get a bag of cocaine tonight. And I'm like, fuck, I was really trying not to do that. And so then, then you're guilty of it because you got that person into it. Well, that's something that I have to live with too, because it's like I never wanted to get people into it.
Oh yeah, no, I had a relationship with a very serious ex back in the day that I introduced her to it, and after a few months, it was her idea to go get a bag, and I was just kind of like, oh great, what have I done? I just destroyed this person basically. Still feel guilt
Right.
to this day about it, but sometimes it's impossible to make amends.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, you can feel guilty about it, but our past is our past. It's been written, and people will make the choices to do what they got to do, or what they're going to do. And it does suck to feel like being somebody who was the influencer of, hey, let's snort some powder up our nose, and then that became a normal for them. That's just how you're like, this is what I want. This is the type of partner I want. I want her to not give me a hard time when I want to do drugs. It's like, no, no, that's not a good partner. That's not a
Yeah,
good partner. And you gotta, like, for me, personally, I can't have that kind of partner in my life because it's like, I'd rather be held accountable instead of being the one person that's like, hey, we are doing this. I'm gonna go do this. And there was a time in that same relationship that I stopped doing it. I stopped drinking, and because I was pretty bad into the drinking thing too, because it was like right around the COVID time. And so I quit drinking, and she wouldn't do it with me, which was, whatever. It's her prerogative. I was out of control. So I quit drinking. I was getting near beers or non-alcoholic beers or whatever they were because I still wanted something. But she would continue to drink, and the funny thing is once I was sober in this relationship and saw how narcissistic this person turned into me when she was drunk, was like that was the ending of our relationship, and became even more toxic. And it's funny because I was with a toxic person, and I guess I kind of made her more toxic. I mean, I guess she was probably pretty crazy when we got together, but it was like when I didn't drink for like 3 or 4 months and didn't touch any drugs, and I was, making food all the time and just going to work and coming home. Like I felt amazing. I lost a bunch of weight. I was getting more active again. And then I have this person that comes home that's accusing me of cheating, accusing me of being on drugs and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, I'm 3 months sober and I haven't done a single thing of this. When she kept saying it, it actually drove me back to doing cocaine by myself. Like when I'd get home, I'd have a bag in the car and I would snort a line before I had to go deal with this broad. And like we were living together at this point, and I she never accused me of doing it after I was on it again. So it's like, I'm getting away with this again.
Yeah.
Never told her about it, and then, the relationship just ended very poorly. It was a very violent, not ending on, I wasn't violent. It was very violent on her ending of it. I ended up leaving. I was like, just pack up your stuff and just go. She broke like a $1,000 watch I had. She punched a couple holes in the drywall. Uh, I think the funniest thing is she urinated in my water bottle.
Jesus, that's some commitment there.
Yeah, right. So it's just like, okay, Amber Heard, right?
Yeah. What's next? Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. At least I didn't find a shit on my pillow or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was just like, wow, dude. And like the whole time, I was like, okay. And then after we broke up, I was single for like a whole year, and I was still on the verge of being sober. I was quit smoking and all this stuff, and then I started feeling normal for the most part, and then I started drinking again, and it's not like I'm not out of control like I was, but I'm still working on that whole journey of not touching alcohol anymore. But the nice thing is not waking up with a hangover anymore, because I don't overdrink. Having a
Yeah.
beer at dinner is okay sometimes, but want to get to that point where I can just go out for a meal, because alcohol is expensive at the grocery store, at the restaurants. It's very expensive.
Nah, it's expensive everywhere, it seems like. I mean, ever since I stopped having to buy alcohol, it's definitely put it towards other things now.
Right?
So one question I have is, so think back a little bit to when you were dating in the midst of like your worst drinking drug use. What were like some red flags that you ignored, that you overlooked with girls, that just so you could date them anyways? What were some things that you just chose to ignore because that you wouldn't overlook nowadays when you're not drinking?
I would probably say that, I dated quite a few chicks that were like very promiscuous and very flirtatious with other dudes. And, I let a lot of things slide where it was like, I kind of knew in the back of my mind that they were probably had a couple extra partners at the same time. And, I was in it for, necessarily the sex. It was, the sex and getting fucked up with somebody. And, thank God I don't have any, STIs or STDs, whatever they call them now. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few that I am not proud of that I was hanging out with, for
Yeah.
sure, because of that lifestyle. And, like what you were saying too, like when you're in that lifestyle, you do go after the people in that mindset and that lifestyle of drinking and drugging and stuff like that. And that's what you attract, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and they're out, they're out doing just as shady things as we're doing, and they're being promiscuous. They're emotionally cheating with people, sometimes physically cheating, being with multiple people. But I mean, I could accuse a lot of exes for doing that, but I also probably did the same. So it's like, yeah, you're in that lifestyle, is just what people do sometimes. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of loyal people that were addicted and drinking and doing drugs, but that, for the most part, we're going to all be doing some shitty things behind the scenes.
Yeah. And it's like, some of the stuff, in certain relationships, like the ones that were really loyal and stuff, I was the one that was stepping out on the relationship, because it was like it was boring at this point, because I'm used to the toxicness. And, I did want a fight at the end of the night, or I did want some kind of battle between each other on, how to navigate through the evening and all that. So,
Yeah, I found that when I would start dating girls that weren't living the same lifestyle as me, and they were girls that were responsible, took care of themselves, weren't doing things, I would think it's good for me. But at the same time, the work I had to put into hiding my own problems and to, try to cover up the fact that I was an addict and alcoholic became exhausting. Not to mention, I didn't have a constant drinking partner in those girls. So I would end up, becoming the asshole. I would get bored, unfortunately, and move on to another toxic relationship, which is what I had was attracted to at the time. So I completely would just disregard these girls that were obviously would have been a lot better for me in the long run, and respected, had self-respect, treated themselves well, didn't have an addiction problem, and it just didn't work for me because it wasn't dysfunctional enough.
Yeah, I know, and it's weird. Now that's what we want in life. Like I would like to have some woman that's in my life that would be more, established, right? That doesn't. I mean, everybody's got their problems, right? But having somebody that doesn't have a drinking problem or a drug problem or eating disorder, those are the kind of things that they're out there. But it's like we also have to be worthy enough for them, right? So it's like I think about it too. Like there are quite a few girls. Like if I would have just not been in the mindset that I'm in now, I'd be in a totally different place right now. I'd probably be, taking vacations and not worrying about anything about being at home, or like being able to take a week off of work and not worry about it because like, hey, I'm on this journey with this girl that actually has her shit together. But no, I
Yeah.
like them broken.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I virtually every girl that I've had past relationships with have some sort of past, and that is not their fault or whatever. I mean, everybody has traumas, but I noticed that being a common theme when I was drinking. And me, I could look at myself and say, I'm broken. I've had traumas, and I wasn't always bringing the best person to the table. And I wasn't giving them the best partner, but I would attract people that were quote unquote broken in a lot of ways, had suffered through a lot, and it definitely impacted their addiction and their personality and how they responded to conflict. Like instead of willing to talk it out, it was throwing lamps at me. So it was
Yeah,
it's
it
exhausting.
it is. I guess one of the things too, like one of my biggest things is like I've been doing. I'm that guy that is like the fixer upper kind of person, and like that's not healthy for me because I'm trying to fix myself at the same time. And that leads to a relationship where you don't have healthy boundaries set up at the beginning. And so when you try to set up healthy boundaries when you're already a year into a relationship, then there becomes resentment between you two as in a relationship, so you start resenting your partner, and that's another very toxic trait that comes along with it. So it's like not saying that things can't be mended or fixed, but it's like you can't expect something after the fact when you never laid it down right in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you
So
ever feel pressured to stay in relationships because you were worried that something bad would happen, or they would hurt themselves or you, or threatened to stay in a relationship?
yeah, yep. And I think that's probably one of the struggles that's actually probably one of the most real, in this time in where I'm at now, not saying that I don't love the person that I'm hanging out with, or whatever, but it's like at the same time, you got to make sure that you're taking care of yourself first.
Yeah.
And
Self-preservation.
yeah, and that's something that I'm working on too, and trying to lay the groundwork, for that whole situation, because it's like, it's hard to just turn your back on somebody that that they're hopeless without you, and that's a bad thing to think about.
Yeah, it is. Do you feel, can you describe a little more about why it's so important to you to start to remind yourself to focus on taking care of yourself before anyone else, and how that is better for the relationship?
Well, I for me, I'm working on the best version of myself, right? And like I'm at that point now where I love myself, and I don't have to pretend to be somebody different. And it's like I know what I bring to the table. I know that I'm honest and I'm trustworthy, and I'm working on being more emotionally available, with all that, and being somebody who listens instead of just talks, and you know, being there even if it's like the most minimal problem that somebody has, you still can be their, support, and just showing people your changes. What it boils down to is like when you're at the best level of yourself, and you're at that point where everything is going well, you want to be the best version and keep growing into that best version, more and more in the future. So I think it is a little bit selfish to get into a relationship with somebody when you're not in your best version. And like, let's say they are, and then you break them down because misery loves company. And so, yeah, I'd say, Don't jump from a relationship to a relationship. Take some time to heal. I mean, that's the best thing I've ever done. I'd rather take time to heal after a relationship because you gotta really refocus your ideal on what life is and where you want to go, and your goals and ambitions and your drive and your motivation and stuff like that can get torn down when you break up out of a relationship, especially a toxic one. You just kind of lose all focus, and then you go right back to what you were doing before,
Do you
again with
think
that vicious cycle.
do you think being in toxic relationships in the past have shaped you into learning how to become a better person to be better for your next partner?
It also, you have that radar now where you look out for things like right at the beginning. You're like, okay, I'm not gonna waste my time with another person who's just gonna take advantage of the fact that this is what I bring to the table, this is what I'm offering, and yeah, and picking out those traits like immediately is a good skill to have, because you're like, man, either we can climb this ladder together or you're gonna pull me back down. And I'm not trying to be back down. I want to keep going up and up and up until I get there. So
Exactly. So, what do you think makes a healthy relationship now? Like, what are the most important traits?
communication, being honest, telling your partner how you feel about certain things in a way that's not like you're not talking down to them, but let them know that like when they do something that hurts your feelings, say it right then and there. Don't let it stew. Don't let it control you. Nip it in the bud as soon as possible and tell your partner to do the same with you. Like, hey, if I did something that upset you, I want it to be brought to my attention. Right. And so like communication is huge. Communication, making sure you pay attention to each other. Date nights, you have to remember to go on date nights at least twice to three times a week. Because if you
Yeah.
don't take your partner out on a date, you guys are just going to start living just a docile life together, and it's just going to be the same motions over and over again, and then it just becomes a cycle.
Yeah.
So and make sure you here's one thing that we do is like after work, if we both get off around the same time, when we get home, we leave our phones in the kitchen, we turn them off, we go into the bedroom and we lay down and we cuddle for at least 10 minutes of silence. And then after that 10 minutes is up, then we can talk about our day. And then after we're done emptying out all the crap that we deal with on a daily basis, we get to enjoy the evening together and, make dinner together, figure out what movie to watch or go do something, that's,
Kind of have a routine together.
yeah, yeah.
That's good. That's
So,
good. Yeah, like quality time is really important, and communication, it sounds like, that are really big for a good relationship. And I think communication, since you mentioned that, I think is most important because it helps you avoid resentment. And I think resentment's the biggest cause of fights in most relationships because you start to resent the person and you don't tell them about it. So it becomes a lingering issue. And then finally, people snap, So it's like, communicating, hey, I don't like when you do this. Let's talk about it now before it becomes a problem.
yeah, yeah.
That kind of stuff.
And one of the biggest things too that I said at the beginning of my relationships, I always tell them this. I'm like, we cannot go to bed mad at each other. That's not something I'm going to do. I'm not going to bed angry with you. Okay. And if there's a problem, we're not going to bed until that problem is resolved. Because the
Yeah.
last thing anybody wants to do is go to bed angry because you're going to wake up angry. And
Yeah.
then yesterday's garbage is going to be tacked along with you when you wake up the next day. And you're just going to be miserable because you didn't fix the problem at the very beginning of when it started.
Exactly.
So, those are some of the healthy boundaries that I've put down, no going to bed mad at each other. Nobody's sleeping out on the couch. You know, you got in a relationship, you like being with that person, then you guys can, you got to figure it out before you end the day, because no one wants to end the day angry.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's in past relationships has always been really hard on me is that I'm an overthinker. So when there's a fight going on and there's tension and the other person can just go to bed, I just remember I would just stare at the ceiling the entire night, pissed off, waiting for the morning, and then I would just be more mad by the time they're ready to talk about it. But I also understand that sometimes different people need time to process what's going on. and get their thoughts together. So I get that too. So it's kind of like finding a balance is the difficult part.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally understand where if you got in a fight with your partner and they just went to bed and went to sleep and left you to your own thoughts. I think that that's not the best way of communication, of course, because that would kind of piss
Yeah.
off anybody, you know.
Make me say,
I mean,
hey, let me think about it, but I still love you. Let's talk in the morning. That would be better.
yeah, like, hey, we're gonna just drop it for tonight because this conversation's not going anywhere because either inebriation or
It's
drugs,
late.
and it's late. Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I guess there's times, but I mean, sometimes just getting that reassurance, I think, would be helpful, at least in my opinion. When it happened to me in the past, all I needed was a little reassurance. I mean, because what do you call it? My sign is a Cancer, and apparently we overthink everything. So I'll just overanalyze the situation. I'll think of all the outcomes and all this when all you have to say is, Ryan, it's okay. Everything will be fine between us, but I'll talk to you more.
right. And there's, and two, like I was saying with those healthy boundaries and stuff, there's nothing wrong with telling your partner, I am an overthinker, and so like these are some of the things that I need to have, uh, for me personally, so I don't, end up spiraling.
Exactly. I agree. I believe this podcast is going to be informative on kind of our outlook, the male outlook on toxic relationships. But what's something that could be helpful to girls, to women that they don't know about us that would make relationships less easier? Like, what's something that most women wouldn't know about guys that we
Well,
or what we like?
I think too that I think a lost message that's not out there now is that like a woman in a relationship with a male, right? She needs to be our peace because when we're out there in the real world, it's not peaceful. We're out there either building houses or working on cars or grinding on stuff or dealing with people, and same goes with women too, right? They have jobs like that as well, but it's like at the end of the day, you need to be a man's peace, don't add the stress to his life. You got to be his peace. And that, I mean, that goes both ways. But I think there's a lot of growing in a lot of people in society where we don't listen to each other anymore, and there's nothing wrong with being upfront if you know yourself well enough on those things that I don't like the word triggering, but on those points for you as a person, if you are downright ready to tell somebody, hey, these are the things that trigger me. This is what upsets me. I think that if you have that basis at the beginning of your relationship, on both sides, your relationship will be the best relationship that you could possibly have.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Just communicating everything all at once, put it on the table, be like, this is who I am. And, that gives the person an opportunity to back off, if they don't like the boundaries, if they don't like what you're bringing to the table, and, they don't think they can actually, that's not going to fit with their lifestyle. That's been the thing. It's like in the past, I looked at more of either physical attraction or lusts and basically let all the other things slide. I'm like, well, I don't care if you're abusive. I don't care if you're, if you like to do this and that, and they don't go with my interests. I just thought about, I mean, I was looking for all the wrong things, and it just turned into a dysfunctional relationship. But if you're honest right off the bat about who you are and what you're going for and what makes you happy in a relationship, I think everybody would get along a lot better.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the biggest things in society too, Ryan, is that when you're looking for your partner and you're only doing it off the surface, right? When you get past the surface, and that's what with that communication side of it, and like letting your partner know, hey, I want to take this journey with you, but I want to let you know, like, these are the things that I will not put up with, or things that I'm not okay with. These are my standards or boundaries or whatever you want to call them. Like, I, and be upfront, like, hey, I will not put up with that. I will not put up with you having your ex-boyfriend on your Facebook, or I don't want you to, if you have a bunch of dudes hitting you up because you're a beautiful girl, I don't want that in my, I don't want that in my life. If you're going to be in a relationship with me, then be in a relationship with me. I'm not saying that sounds a little controlling, but it's the same thing like when you get married to somebody. Everybody else in the world doesn't matter. Your partner matters the most. You picked her, she picked you. everybody else can, move on with their own little dramas and stuff, and don't let people get involved in your relationship, and don't have any outside, like, don't let outsiders influence your relationship, because that's another thing, like I told my girlfriend too. I said, if you're talking about our relationship to other people and not me, and then I have to hear it secondhand that you're saying a bunch of stuff about this and we haven't talked about it, so I didn't know it was a problem,
That's
then you're
frustrating.
the problem, right? Because I want to communicate and get things taken care of right at the beginning. I want to sit on it, stew on it, or have to be like, man, Casey's a dick, dude. He told his girlfriend that she needs to delete all those guys off of her Facebook. Yeah, I
Yeah.
did, because I don't want you having a bunch of guys on your Facebook, because I know how guys are. They're slimy, they're gross. They only want one thing, and you're a pretty girl, and maybe you're naive to the fact, but I told her, so you can't, it's
Yeah.
either me or the guys on your Facebook.
And yeah, girls and us guys, everybody can be naive, and in the back of the mind, sometimes we want to think, oh yeah, these people hitting us up, they just want to be friends or whatever. They're two friends, but in reality, you got to think like, okay, well, they think like guys. I'm a guy, so I know that they're not looking to be friends with you. They're not just reaching out to a pretty girl just to be friends. It's not possible
No, unless they're gay,
unless they, yeah, exactly.
which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with being gay. Okay, I'm gonna say that
No,
right
no,
now.
no. But it's nothing wrong with that. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it's like people want to see the best of people and they just want to assume everybody has the right intentions. But I would say a good majority of the time they don't if they're, reaching out, especially online and all that stuff. So, um,
Well,
so
and
what are
there's
like some,
always there's always that back pocket person.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There was, uh, the girlfriend I had a few years ago, I remember there was a guy that she Snapchatted with throughout the entire relationship. They had a 400-day streak going throughout the entire relationship, streak, whatever the hell that is. And I was just kind of like, the entire time I was like, this guy, he likes you, like it's just a little, makes me uncomfortable. Can you just, and then she snapped one day and said, I'm just going to delete him on everything and never talk to him again. I'm like, that's a little extreme. I mean, can you at least just like maybe not talk to him as much because I don't want him to get the wrong impression? And I find out months after breakup, months, these two are engaged. So I was like, all right, back pocket guy worked out. Yeah. And then I find out later on that she ended up committing domestic violence on him too. So I guess that turned into a pattern, and now they're broken up.
Right. She's stuck in her own toxic cycle.
Yeah, I'm glad to be out of that now, but I wasn't perfect in that relationship either. I had also experienced a moment where I was sleeping nice and sound, and I'm a diva. I sleep with eye covers on, and I just got hit in the face while I was sleeping perfectly. I get up just all confused, and I was
Yeah.
wailing my hands everywhere, thinking I was having a nightmare. And yeah, I mean, it was just bloody nose, blood everywhere. Yeah, I was pissed.
I think that the times have changed quite a bit too, dude, because it's like it used to be the other way around. Like, women were the most loyal ones, and now it seems like it's gone backwards. Now you got all these guys that want to be in a relationship, want to get married. They don't want to have, I mean, like, I don't have any girls on my Facebook that I speak to on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, I don't, and like being a mechanic and having side work, I have female customers that I deal with, but I don't hang out with them outside of working on their car, because they pay me to do a service.
Yeah. You have to keep it professional and cordial, but beyond that, is crossing the line if you're in a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's the standard goes both ways. Like when it comes to certain things, like if my girlfriend said, "Hey, this who's this person on your Facebook?" and I'm like, "Yeah, that's so and so, and I work on her car." And we, as who I am, I develop not like it's a friendship that I have with these people because they trust me. And if I trust you, I let you in a little bit on my life, on the inside of who Casey is. I'm a loving father. I have a good relationship with my kid's mom. Those are the two that are most important to me always. And like, even I've had to say that in the beginning of a relationship, like, hey, I am a single dad. I do take care of my kid's mom a little bit financially because that's part of my duty because she's got my child. And so, if you're okay with that, that's kind of where I'm at. And yes, when I go down to see them, sometimes I stay at their house that I pay for, or I stay in a hotel. And, it's just one of those things. Like, I'm a good man when it comes to my kid's mom, even though we haven't been in a relationship for 12 years. But at the same time, this is the baggage that comes with me, right? So, and being upfront about that.
How
And
important is it to, you mentioned doubles, like have the same standards. How important is it to not have double standards? Because I hear that coming up a lot in relationships where it's like, it's okay for me to do something, but if you do the exact same thing, I'm going to react to it. Like double standards are everywhere. Did you ever have those with girls? And do you ever have you had it happen to you?
oh yeah, many times. Well, and being accused of things like you're not doing, like having a double standard. I Back when Instagram first came out, let's put it this way, love taking pictures. Photography was one of those things. I like art and I like good pictures. I like seeing cool things. I had one of those Instagrams back in the day where I had like 100 and something, 100K followers. And
Damn.
my my kid's mom at the time was upset because I was on this social media platform and I was starting to gain a bunch of followers. And she was like, well, I checked out your Instagram and there's a bunch of these girls that are following you and blah, blah. And I was like, okay, I don't know any of those people. Am I following them back? She said no. And she's like, well, I don't trust this thing. I want you to delete it. And I'm like, I have 100+ K followers, right? This is like brand new social media.
That sucked.
And not that I was chasing anything. I didn't know, I was just a young 20-year-old playing around on some platform that you could edit pictures when you took them with your phone. And I was like, this is really cool. And
But
I
you
was
were
doing
getting a
it for
lot of attention, I assume.
I was getting a lot of attention. And the thing was, I wasn't doing it for the attention. I was just doing it for me. And it became such an argument with her because there was, hot girls following me or girls would comment on my photo. Wow, that's really gorgeous. I'd love to go there with you. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Um, and so she made me delete my Instagram profile. And I was like, okay, well, if I delete this, then, that's fine. But then I didn't have like a ultimatum with her, it was just like, okay, you got a bunch of interesting people on your Facebook. And why do you have to have all these older men on your Facebook? Like, what are you doing there? And nothing would ever come of it. So I just let it go. But there's, one of those double standards. It's like I actually had something that was that, dude. If I probably still had that thing now, maybe I'd be, one of those Instagrammers or
You'd be getting
something.
paid, yeah.
Yeah, but whatever, that's in the past. It's not here, not there anymore. So, but that's one thing that it does still kind of stick with me. It still kind of stings a little bit because I was like, man, I worked really hard on that, and that was before all the hashtag thing came around. So, when you're working at something and it just comes natural and it's easy, yeah, I mean, fuck, that was one of those things that kind of still kind of bugs me a little bit, but it's like it's in the past now. But yeah, double standards for sure. Or
Yeah.
coming back to that whole back pocket thing, like I still think Snapchat's probably the most cheater. It's a cheater's app is what that is.
It's the shadiest app.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't. Yeah. It's hard to be in a relationship with somebody that's on Snapchat all the time. I mean, yeah, I was in a relationship where that was the only way she and I actually communicated. I hardly remember texting, and that was over the course of a year. But I used Snap to communicate with her, but she used it to communicate with every other guy. And after a while, I mean, I finally figured out what Snapchat really was about. And I was like, holy crap, what the hell are you actually doing with these guys?
Right. And the crazy part is the messages delete themselves.
Yep.
So
Yep,
it's a
they're
hidden message
encrypted.
board.
Yeah. So that's really shady. So what are some healthy practices that you would recommend to guys going into relationships now, especially guys that are in sobriety and they're trying to avoid toxic relationships? Is there any advice that you'd give to create a healthy relationship from a guy's approach?
Yeah, go old school.
Chivalry.
Yeah, chivalry. Take it slow, build it. Don't just go for the gusto right at the beginning, right? You build the relationship in a way that you guys have memories. You have things that you can talk about, healthy things. Don't just jump right in bed with each other. Make the relationship blossom into something where it's going to be amazing, right? It's not just all about the lust or the looks. Get to know the person even better. Take your time, go on dates, try new foods, go on some hikes, talk about real life stuff, talk about your past a little bit. Don't just hop into a relationship. And the other thing that we got, most of us do too, is be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Because
Exactly.
once you stop being somebody you're not, then who are you?
Point. That is well said. I honestly, I've pretended to be somebody else in so many relationships, and I regret it so bad because it's not fair for the other person to have one impression of you when inside you're somebody completely different.
Yeah. Be goofy. Be funny.
Oh yeah,
Crack
be
jokes.
yourself.
Be
Crack
yourself.
jokes.
Say exactly how you feel when you feel it.
Yep.
Don't.
Transparency.
Yes. Don't hide anything.
Exactly. Is there any advice besides what you said earlier about what girls should try to recognize with what guys go through on a day-to-day basis? But is there any other advice that you'd give to girls when it comes to approaching men in sobriety and avoiding toxic relationships?
That's
It's hard from a male standpoint. I
it is hard
understand.
from a male standpoint, but having some kind of belief system, in line too, in sobriety, or having a partner, or for a woman to go into a relationship with a man who's in sobriety. Remember that we're weak in certain areas, and so don't pick out the weakness, build up the strengths.
I think that's one of the toughest things about being a guy sometimes is that, we're a lot of times expected to be strong and be able to handle everything emotionally, physically, and this and that. But in reality, I mean, we are still sensitive beings. We still go through hardships. We still have emotion, get emotional. We just have to put on this tough front sometimes, and that can be exhausting. And I think if women understood, that we do come from a sensitive place every now and again, that we'd understand each other better.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, dude, because, men, yes, we are supposed to be strong, but that doesn't mean we're robots. We have emotions. There's days where I'll be listening to a song and it'll bring up a memory and it'll make me cry. And you know what? I'm a tattooed tough mechanic man, and yes, I cry because crying is healthy. It's a normal thing. Feeling things is a normal thing. Having emotions is a normal thing. It's no one should ever suppress their emotions for somebody in a relationship. No one
Exactly.
should ever have to feel like, oh, I'm the man. I should never shed a tear. I should never let anything bother me. Well, that's not real life. We have feelings. Most men have more feelings in their body than women do sometimes, because we love just as hard or harder every day. Even when you piss us off, we still love you. And we get up every day and we grind every day for our families and for the people we love. And it does take a huge toll on us, because sometimes we don't even feel like we're appreciated as much either. And so that's why a lot of guys, when you find your partner getting silenced or being more silent and shutting down, is because he is having to bottle up all of his emotions, and he's having to sit there in his own mind and have his own war every single day because he can't be emotional with you.
That is, yep, very well said. It is, we want the green light to be emotional and to express ourselves and to cry. That's one of my biggest issues. It's hard for me to cry, but if I feel vulnerable enough, it would be nice to be able to cry in a relationship.
Yeah, as you should. I mean, the amount of loss and things and places and people and all the stuff and memories and everything else that we've had to go through, those are all going to be things that we're going to carry along with us all the time. So yeah, there's going to be a moment where you're going to cry on your partner's shoulder, like, hey, you just, like the fact that we talked about how you lost your sister, like, that's a tough thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's something that you shouldn't ever not talk about because it's your sister and she was an important person in your life.
Yeah, she was.
And so like that's being able to communicate those kind of feelings with your partner, being like, hey, it's my sister's birthday and I'm going to celebrate my sister.
Yeah, that's a good
And
point. I appreciate that.
of course, dude, you
Yep.
know, it's like what I told you about my older brother who is somewhere out on the streets. I don't know if he's alive or not, you know, and
Yeah,
that's the thing that
heartbreaking.
it bugs me too, you know. I'm sitting
Yeah.
over here teary eyed talking about your sister because
Yeah.
it's not life shouldn't have been cut that short. And that's not here nor there, and that's not a choice, but she should always be celebrated.
I agree. Thank you.
And same with people that have lost their parents, you know.
Yep.
It's the same
Lost
thing.
parents, siblings, loved ones, you know, it's everybody's fighting hardships. We just gotta be supportive.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate
life,
that.
yeah, dude, of course. You know, life is an amazing, beautiful thing that we have. And everybody out there in the world has something going on, whether it's the same or not. They're still going down some kind of emotional traumas or pasts or anything like that. No one is better or worse. Maybe some are worse, but nothing that comes from life is ever gonna, you know, take away from the fact that you're still gonna have emotion and you're still gonna feel things and you're still gonna have to. Don't bottle them up, because if you do, all that's going to do is just break you down even faster.
Very well said. We covered a lot on this subject. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I stop the recording? We'll do more segments in the future, but we did a solid hour on the male opinion on toxic versus healthy
I
relationships.
definitely am looking forward to having a female perspective on the show.
I'm
We can
doing
all
the
have.
exact same thing with the girl that I have chosen, and I think she's going to be perfect for this. So I'm going to have your episode as part one, the male opinion, the mic on with Casey mic on. And then the next one, I'm going to have this girl I know who I think is going to be perfect as far as that goes. She's had a lot of experience with toxic relationships and is very good with words like you are. So I think I got two perfect opinions to have on the show.
So
And then
I guess what I would end it with is that, you know, just keep surviving and thriving, and remember that God will mess up your plans for the right reasons. So enjoy the detour.
Rock Bottom with Ryan. No bullshit, just recovery.
that was awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I enjoy these. These are something that I get to look forward to, and it's helping a lot too with where I'm at on this journey as well.
Hell yeah. It helps you express yourself.
Well, it's good to be heard, and I hope that the things that I'm saying for some people will help. If not, no big deal. But you know, just make sure
I've gotten feedback from the episode that we did a few weeks ago, and people like your episode. I listened to episode, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that what you're doing is going to make an impact, and I'm glad I get to be a part of Rock Bottom with Ryan.
Nah, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
this is awesome. We're going to be doing more segments.
This has been one of those things, dude, where this journey, like I've said, it's taken me 10 years to find out, you know, where I'm at. And, you know, as long as I keep going and keep making a difference in myself, like I said, dude, these blessings I get, they keep coming, right?